It is finally time. After years of anticipation, we finally got a more proper kind of reveal of Starfield. So it still was an in-game teaser trailer, not real proper gameplay or a full-on reveal, but the big difference this time around is, one, the teaser trailer itself actually contains a lot of very revealing information, and even further, and perhaps more importantly and more revealing, to go along with this, there was actually a secondary video created by Bethesda on almost the making of Starfield and what looks like is going to be a series on that topic, which has some very, very telling concept art shown off in it, but also several interviews done by Todd and other Bethesda staff. So in this video, what I did was compile all of that information, a trailer breakdown analysis, an analysis and breakdown of all of the other information we got even outside of that teaser, which for me is actually a lot more exciting. Some of these interviews give off big details. And if you want some incentive to get subscribed, it very much so looks like this is just the beginning, as just tomorrow, more in-depth and detailed interviews are going to be getting published, and I'll be covering all of this for you. So if you want to keep up to date with Starfield and all of the ensuing news, definitely get subscribed right now. But otherwise, to just start things off, let's break down this teaser trailer itself. I went through it pretty slowly, frame by frame, and tried to pick out any major details or just notable observations. And for a lot of this, I actually combined that information with some of the other things mentioned in interviews by Todd Howard and others.
Constellation Starship Frontier, we have you on scanners. Performing remote systems check. Helium-3 tanks checked. Seals are intact. We are still go.
So it's a little hard to make out what they're saying at the start of this, but what is mentioned is Constellation Starship Frontier. We have you on scanners. And we have this video feed where it said almost from the perspective of a moon base. And it seems like it's that moon base from the trailer that's spotting the Constellation Starship named Frontier on their scanners. And then later on, they do mention Helium-3 tanks checked, seals are intact, we are still a go, which seems to be the pilot of the ship kind of responding like, hey, we're ready for takeoff. That Helium-3 quote is actually pretty notable. All the way back at E3 2019, we heard how ships in Starfield will use helium-3 as fuel, and clearly that continues to be the case even now. As you get into the actual in-game shots, or what look like in-game shots of this trailer, there is an important disclaimer. This is described as alpha in-game footage. So now, what does that actually mean? Like, is this exactly how good the game will look? And it seems at least somewhat promising. Like, it's not in-engine footage, which many trailers have cited, but alpha in-game footage. So clearly there's some editing or custom work being done here, but hopefully this is pretty representative of what the final product will end up looking like. On this first interior shot, we are met with a giant ladder. If you haven't been following the Starfield speculation scene, there's been a ton of memes about ladders, even some Bethesda employees jumping in on the action. And overall, the design of this ship, as that's what this is, the interior of the spaceship, does have a very expeditionary vibe, if that even makes sense. Like, we are definitely going to some frontiers and need all kinds of equipment and supplies with us, which is something we'll get back around to in a little bit. Something else I noticed here that was pretty interesting is you can actually see some external dust or wind effects on the side of the ship. It's kind of subtle. I missed it the first couple of times watching the trailer, but it does suggest that there are going to be some actual effects on planets, whether it be from the weather or just environment overall. And then we perhaps have a big moment for a Bethesda game where you can see the spaceman literally climbing the ladder. Climbable ladders have never been a thing in BGS games, so this could seemingly be a huge feature addition, although it could also be a hoax, because a quote from Todd Howard makes it seem like things may not be as they seem. In an interview, somebody asked about this climbable ladder, and he says, well, climbing is not ... Don't read too much into the ladder. It's a ladder to get you in and out of the spaceship, that's about it. We may have to clarify that. Exciting video game features, they're a pain. So perhaps you can just hit E on the ladder and it'll kind of play an animation that you're going up the ladder, but you can't climb it directly. I'm not really sure what to make of all of that. Although, something that is spotted while climbing this ladder that is actually pretty exciting is it looks like we are wearing a jetpack, familiar from those leaked images, but even further, it very much so looks like visible holstered weapons could be making a return. So whichever weapon you have equipped and holstered on your character will be visibly seen on your character. This big table is pretty interesting. It almost seems like a navigational table or chart of some kind with a ton of information about your ship and the given area. And if you look at the screen, it looks like it is topographic maps likely of the place you currently are landed. You can see stuff like the ship's current status status, how navigation was seemingly complete, some configurations for the chart itself, and even a navigator, which seems to have certain options to track specific coordinates. On the bottom side, there's quite a bit of interesting information. Also, seemingly the name of this location, Deep Core Astro something, I can't make out that Astro word, but Deep Core Astro Station, that is likely the station we could see in the background that we are landed at. And above this, we could actually see Astro something reference. So what I think this is the name of the station yet again, and some notable locations in the area. But also you have this familiar HUD. We don't get a look at first person or any HUD elements during this gameplay, but from the past leaked images, we saw a HUD that looked very similar to this. Obviously it has some major modifications here, but it looks like it maintained the O2 to CO2 meter. It also looks like it might read that it is 72 degrees out. To the side of that, we seem to have some kind of ETA to somewhere. It's going to take us about 22 minutes to get to whatever that location is. And with this table shot overall, I do wonder if we'll actually be able to interact with this table. It seems like it would be pretty valuable, and I can imagine it almost functioning like a workbench where you go up to it, hit the use key, and then you will actually get into some kind of HUD around the table where you could input certain information. But then we transition to a much less high-tech and more traditional table. This has a bunch of generic stuff. A sandwich, which reportedly was carefully crafted by Bethesda. Apparently getting the space cheese just right was somewhat difficult. We'd actually see what looked like some seeds in Tupperware in the background, a coffee tumbler, a baked potato. A little bit of an interesting background on the baked potato. Reportedly in the Starfield universe, Chunks is a mixed process space food, almost like an MRE. So Chunks seemingly be the brand. The baked potato is like the flavoring or what's actually in that thing. We see this Nova Galactic company come up a couple of times. I could see it being perhaps one of the relevant companies in the universe, maybe the manufacturer of the spaceship or something. And then we get a look at our firearm and what almost looks like a grenade, or at least I thought it was a grenade, but zooming in on it, it literally says Digipie on this. So really not certain as to what that could be. The weapon overall though is really interesting. It basically is designed like a futuristic P90. And it seems like the future brings digital magazines, as this magazine actually has a display on the top of it. It has relevant information like the rounds left in the mag with 24, but also it is a 100 round mag in total. The caliber here is 7.77 by 37 millimeter. This almost looks like a ballistic icon, like perhaps some of the various damage types. So while this is a ballistic mag, maybe there's other things like energy damage mags that you can get for this weapon. And also towards the bottom, the weapon has a battery indicator for a built-in battery pack. I don't see an obvious use for this. Perhaps there's some kind of mechanism with the weapon folding or unfolding or something like that, maybe a flashlight. But it's interesting because the weapon clearly does have bullets. It does say how many rounds are left and the magazine size overall, but the battery pack does something else. So even though at first glance the shelf scene may seem relatively mundane, it actually is extremely revealing. So these two books you can see on the left side do seem significant. The first book is Sailing Alone Around the World, and the second one is called Omega. These are both real world books. Sailing Around the World is a memoir of the first person to actually sail on a boat around the earth all by themselves, and he later disappeared sailing in that very same boat. Omega is a old French sci-fi novel from 1894. The premise of this one is a comet is crashing into Earth, destroying all life on it, and it's exploring the political consequences of that destruction. This seems like it is definitely revealing the story aspects of Starfield. So putting those two together, we are on a mission all by ourselves. Probably Earth is doomed. Something is happening with Earth. So perhaps we are exploring the universe to find a suitable replacement or several suitable replacements. And maybe we even get lost along the way. It doesn't seem like a coincidence, especially with that book Omega. I doubt Bethesda just picked a random book from 1894 to put on this bookshelf. And some facts to support this. On the Starfield website, it does say, we've come to the beginning of humanity's final journey for all into the Starfield. And in a video, Todd Howard says, Starfield is about hope, our humanity, and sharing answers for life's greatest mystery. So it definitely seems like those are the major plot points of Starfield. Even outside of that, we do have the Constellation Spacefarer's Guide, which seems to be a top-down shot of the space station we could see in the original teaser trailer of Starfield. There's a helmet with a crack or some kind of gunshot in it. We have this Constellation container, which contains the Chronomark Life Pack interlink, and I think that's going to be almost the Pip-Boy of Starfield's universe, a smartwatch you can wear, and perhaps the justification for your HUD elements. The reason I mention this is later on in a different video, we could see a similar looking container open up with a little watch in it. So Constellation is a big one. Basically, Constellation is the company we are working for in Starfield. We'll touch on this a bit bit later as we talk about some of the interviews, but more or less it is the final Frontier Expedition company and we are working for them. And it's a big point in their marketing material right now, all about joining Constellation. Similar to that previous shot, this next shot does reveal quite a bit. We see some quotes on the wall, how Sedania Security doesn't have a sense of humor. Obviously that suggests visiting several different star bases. We tell Vasco we are out of Tranquil T. So Vasco is this robot. We had that confirmed in an interview and it seems like he's going to be the first real crew member we see here. All throughout this trailer, we are only seeing the protagonist, or what is assumed to be the protagonist in this main character in a spacesuit. The only other thing we see is Vasco, which again is seemingly this companion robot that will come with us. I can already see how in the future there's going to be a ton of memes created around Vasco, and of course his name likely being a reference to Vasco da Gama, the famous explorer. There's a mention of upgrading a reactor. I think this could be a hint that we can upgrade our ships overall. In interviews, Todd Howard made it clear a lot of the stuff you're seeing in this teaser is carefully placed. So even though it may seem like we're over speculating on what is otherwise just a throwaway line, I think there might actually be something there. We see this Ranger badge in metal, a 10th Planet patch. 10th Planet was a past game Bethesda started working on but never actually finished, a space game, and these diagrams are significant. In an interview, somebody asked Todd what is going on here, and he said it's basically something mysterious to be figured out. It seems like in the diagram somebody is decoding something. You can see the alpha, beta, chi. It almost seems like this circle could kind of be a word or something in a different language, and you have to pick out the different pieces and figure out what exactly it says. I imagine over the next couple of weeks people are going to be speculating and tearing this apart heavily, so I'm excited to see where it goes. We get some outside panning shots where we could actually see our ship is named the Frontier. Even further, we could see some better shots of our robot dog Vasco. We could see him getting on the ship. We could also see the Frontier is quite beat up. Seemingly we have gone through several expeditions or journeys and definitely sustained some damage along the way. And in the background you have the one good look at the space base itself. There's really not a ton to tear apart here. It just kind of looks like a space base with some kind of interesting maybe satellite or solar panel or something on top. In interviews, Todd Howard said basically all of these various switches and toggles actually do have a label and a function. Not necessarily a function in game, but in the grander scheme of this ship they do something. On this display it definitely implies that space combat is a thing. We can actually see labels for weapons and a shield. Next to that, propulsion control and the primary flight display, but that gets me hopeful that space flight and space combat will be a component of this game. There's also this little island you could see, or what people are thinking is an island sketched into the side here. Some people speculating this could be a reference to a location for the next Elder Scrolls game, as it does somewhat visually look similar to the Iliac Bay. The trailer ends off with the ship igniting its engines and taking off, which I think in the grand scheme does again suggest space travel perhaps is something we can actually do. Overall with the trailer, I think it really seems to imply this is going to be a big Frontier game, perhaps having some ship travel in focus, but a real emphasis on going to different places. We are looking for something, looking for answers, and I imagine you're going to be encountering a lot of different people, factions, planets, and locations along the way, with it being described on a high level as a next generation RPG set amongst the stars. Create a character you want and explored with unparalleled freedom as you embark on an epic journey to answer humanity's greatest mystery. So while the teaser itself on a high level, the first time I watched it, really didn't get me all that hyped, as you start to dig in, break down, and find out some of this extra information, it did get me a bit more excited. But what really took me to the next level when it comes to hype is some of the extra information that came out around all of this. So it seems like a couple of media outlets got exclusive access to Starfield early, so they got to look at the trailer as well as a different video, and access to interview Todd Howard and perhaps some other members of the Bethesda team. One of the big ones being Washington Post, who seemingly got the most full open access out of anyone. They got to look at the Starfield trailer early and question Todd Howard about it, and what did they end up doing? Well, they actually leaked the Starfield teaser trailer shown at E3 several hours before E3. Nice job, Washington Post. With that said, we definitely got some super interesting information around this. One of the first things, a couple of quotes. Todd Howard describes Starfield simply as Skyrim in space, and Ashley Chang, the studio director, does say, "For me, Starfield is the Han Solo simulator. Get in a ship, explore the galaxy, do fun stuff." That second quote in particular getting me incredibly hyped. But so obviously now when it comes to Starfield, we've kind of find ourselves in a weird situation in that we have a Bethesda Game Studios game that they're talking about doing interviews for that is still 16 months from release. And what I think is going on here is they're are actually going to be teasing this or kind of sharing information over a longer term. As one of the videos that was created by Bethesda and then debuted with the Washington Post article, they kind of got exclusive coverage for it, is this thing called Constellation Log into the Starfield, sharing some concept art, some details, but Todd also says for the first time we'll provide an inside look into the inspiration and process behind Starfield. And it ends with it saying the journey starts today. And it really seems like this is kind of just the first Constellation Log. Like this will be something we have somewhat regularly, giving us a bit of a background or deeper dive. This first one's only a short 2-minute video. It's not really diving into things super deep. I imagine that is to come. Otherwise, some of the other stuff we could find throughout this is we actually get a look at the main menu. Fairly simple. I mean, it's just the Starfield logo and then click a button to start. Some other general behind the scenes shots of animation, world creation, describing how Bethesda only now really has the tech to actually pull this game off. We hear a description of Constellation, how it's the last group of space explorers who we will be joining in the game, and a re-emphasis on that we could be who we want, go where we want in Starfield. And then as I touched on earlier during the breakdown, we get a look at what I assume is going to be the collector's edition box and probably a smartwatch to go along with it, or at least it definitely looks like some kind of smartwatch to go along with it. Pretty cool. Definitely a bit of a more interesting collector's edition. I wonder how much this will cost, and again, I think this is definitely a pretty big hint that that smartwatch is kind of a boy-esque item in this game. But the biggest thing they show off here, and it's not even close, is some of the concept art. And this gets me more hyped for Starfield than I think anything else showcased thus far. So one of the images, we have a spaceship with some vertical thrusters. It could actually be our own spaceship. It seems to have a interesting design. We can see what looks like one of the various planets we'll be able to go to, and clearly those are aliens, right? Like there's not really many ways to interpret what those creatures are in that kind of swampy desert dune-esque area. And I think to me this confirms alien races or species in Starfield, which isn't really that crazy. Who knows how intelligent some of the aliens will be. I think it'd be cool to have some intelligent aliens, but a ton of just kind of monstrous ones that you fight off or fend off against. We got just this shot of a planet. There's really not much to make of it, at least in my eyes. This of a city, that looks really cool. You'd actually see a little spaceship towards the top almost flying into the city, but just has a crazy and super interesting design. It looks super dense. I wonder how explorable places like this will actually be in practice. A couple of people exploring through some kind of cave system. You could actually see what looks like some kind of tool they were using to excavate the cave beforehand. A hangar here which seems to have somebody with that familiar backpack our main protagonist was wearing, and some kind of hangar where it seems like it's either repair, maintenance, or maybe just loading various spaceships with things. Another super cool shot of a city, and this looks like just a giant space area that you can go to. You can see some flying ships above it and just flying around you. If we get something even remotely close to this in game, even if it's like the capital city, the one big city, this is going to be crazy to experience for the first time. But in the next image, you almost have a completely opposite environment. Your character going through what looks like a super overgrown swamp area. And then the final two, there's not a ton to break down, but you can see what looks like an ocean-based city of some kind, a couple of domes that seem to have inhabitants in them and some boats around it. And then what almost looks like more of kind of a frontier city, something that was set up relatively recently, not as well built or established. But what this really shows is just the diversity of environments that we will seemingly get to experience in Starfield. Like there have been leaks that suggest 3 or 4 planets that you could go to and explore. This makes it seem like it is a lot more than that. Like there is going to be a wide variety of different places you can travel to, different things you can see, and just the designs of some of these do look absolutely insane and extremely exciting. We also get a look at some armors. I mean, they're pretty cool, not quite as exciting, at least for me, as some of the cities, but they definitely have a pretty cool design. It almost gives me like Mad Max vibes in a way. They all almost look like futuristic raiders that are in spacesuits with jetpacks, and considering basically every character we've seen or every main character we've seen has had a jetpack, that is seemingly a core component of this game. That was some of the stuff shown off in the 2-minute video from Bethesda, but then there was also an accompanying interview where we got quite a bit in the way of additional details. It's described how we start off the game joining Constellation, we'll build our character's background with many options for customization, and how some of the options we choose will actually impact how parts of the game unfold. Almost sounds somewhat similar to what was described with Cyberpunk's life path system or trait system, but didn't really come to fruition when you actually played the game too much. And it's described as having lots of factions in the game, but Constellation is really the main one we're going to be joining. The design of Starfield overall is similar to that of Skyrim, where you are your own person and you can join several factions and kind of carve out your own path. The game has its story it wants to tell you, but then you also have the ability to create your own stories and go on side missions in this world. Bethesda actually created an internal wiki just for Starfield details because of course there isn't a public-facing wiki they could use. 450 developers are working on this game. That is up from 100 on Fallout 4. They didn't consider naming this anything other than Starfield. They created a timeline of what happens every decade in the Starfield universe. So starting from present time going up until when the game takes place, and this game takes place 300 years in the future. And in this future, man is now living amongst the stars, but they don't go too much more in depth on that. We can see Vasco in the teaser trailer, but reportedly there is a wide variety of robots featured in this game. He is just one of the examples. As far as the release date, Todd Howard thinks they will hit that release date. The reason they announced the release date is because they are very confident it'll actually come out then. And right now there's no companion app like Fallout Shelter planned for Starfield, but possibly in the future a movie or TV show could be on the table. Actually makes me wonder what the mobile game Bethesda is working on is then. A lot of people just assumed it would be a Starfield mobile. In a separate interview on the Telegraph's website, a bit of a shorter one, we got a few more details. Reportedly in Starfield, it's going to ask some big hard-hitting questions. It gets into things like science, religion, and some other big questions that will get you thinking. And everything in the trailer is deliberately placed. There are a lot of details there, a lot of dissecting that will probably come in the coming days and things to find. And then lastly, it is confirmed Tom Cruise is not in the game. One other thing that wasn't super relevant, but I just wanted to highlight, the art style of this is really cool. You keep seeing these kind of colorful stripes on a lot of the marketing material. And on the official Starfield website, they actually redid all of the major social media logos in that style. I just think it's really cool. I think it's probably an idea as to what we can expect when it comes to this game and the marketing around it going forward. But that said, that was a pretty long one. But that should pretty much get you up to date with all of the stuff we know about Starfield right now. A breakdown on that teaser trailer, a lot of these interviews and other details to come out. Tomorrow, we will reportedly have more. Unless you're watching this video in the days after it goes live, you could check on my channel. There was supposedly more information coming out and I will definitely be covering it if you want to get subscribed or just look at those videos. With that said, it really feels like this is just the start of the journey with Starfield. I have a feeling I'm going to be talking a lot more about interviews, teasers, and concept art / images shared, and I'm quite excited to see where all of this takes us. With that said, as always again, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.